This program was made possible in part by grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of Seven, Spokane, Washington.
The lakes and streams of the Lewis River Valley flow to the south of Mount St. Helens. At its feet, roads lead through the trees to the town of Cougar, Washington. In normal summers, a town full of tourists who patronize the motels and stores. This summer, it's been different.
We call Cougar East Berlin, USA, because they put the roadblock up on us. We had to sign our rights away to get permits to come in here. I mean, it's almost like living in a communist country because they're dictating to you what you can and cannot do, who can come in and who can't. And a couple of the papers have referred to the roadblock as the Berlin Wall.
Washington State blocked the roads in a 20-mile circle around Mount St. Helens to keep people out of an area called the Red Zone. Cougar was inside the Red Zone. So Kathy Boutwell, who lives in Cougar, hit the roadblock at least twice a day on her way to and from work.
Can't have my family or friends in. I was talking to my mother last night. She went down to the Department of Licensing that gives the permits to come in this area, and they were trying to get a day pass to come in to see me. And I have to go down. She found out that I have to go down there with them to the Department of Licensing before they'll give them a permit. Which means is a 60-mile, 70-mile trip for me one way to go to the Department of Licensing to get this permit. And then by the time you get it and come back, you don't even have time to be in the area because it's only good for about 4 or 5 hours. And every time there's an eruption or the thing burps a little bit that they get a little worried about, they shut off all deliveries up in here. You don't get the paper, your garbage doesn't get picked up, the stores don't get their deliveries, nobody's allowed through except as permanent residents.
St. Helens has just dropped a few pieces of pumice on Cougar. The state's bothered the residents more than the volcano has, and even that's over. In October, the town and the road to it were removed from the red zone. But it's been different on Mount St. Helens' north side. To the north, St. Helens used to fall from False Summit to Spirit Lake, a lake of water from its melting glaciers, which then flowed on westwards to form the Toutle River. Mount St. Helens awoke on March 27, 1980, shooting ash and steam 4 miles into the air and cutting a 250-foot crater in the summit glacier. Buck and Jeannie Gaze lived on the north bank of the Toutle, about 30 miles from the mountain.
Well, it really didn't bother me because, you know, like the geologist said, it could steam for, 10 days or 10 years, or they just didn't have any idea. And so we didn't either, and never seeing or hearing about anything like that in our country.
The ash and steam continued to puff throughout April. Then the north side of the summit began bulging outwards at the rate of 5 feet a day. That was fast. Mountains usually move fractions of inches in a year. Downstream on the Toutle, Jeannie Gaze began May 18th sitting in the sun on her deck.
Well, I came down and I made a cup of coffee, and I went out on the deck and drank my coffee and saw what a beautiful day it was, and the weather report was that it was going to be sunny all day. And I saw some weeds down on the river bank that I thought should be pulled that afternoon. I was going to have my grandchildren come out and play, and that was about the time the mountain blew, but even being out on the deck, I didn't hear it or see anything.
30 miles upriver, the top 2/3 of a cubic mile of Mount St. Helens exploded. A shockwave of smashed ice and rock raced northward at 200 miles an hour, while a pillar of volcanic ash shot 12 miles into the sky. Spirit Lake disappeared under 40 feet of boiling mud. Fir trees that had seen pioneer geologists climb by in the 1840s were ripped up and tossed over the neighboring foothills. And from within the mountain, gases and rock at 800 degrees Fahrenheit melted the glaciers into torrents of mud that streamed down the Toutle River at 30 miles an hour. 31 people were killed. Another 31 are still missing. Buck Gaze was nearly caught by the second flood wave.
So Cliff and I came down and we talked to all the people along the road here. Everybody was happy. We had a few beers along the road with people and waved at people across the river there. And We was all happy. We made it. So then we heard that this next one was coming through at 5 feet. Wasn't even concerned about it. Everybody was out. And I said, well, I'll stop in and get the cat. I left my cat there. We'd pull in the driveway, started to go in the driveway, and we couldn't get it in. The mud was right up to the road. So we just highballed it, got up to Clifford's. I let him off. Then I got up to the Tower Bridge, and the sheriff's deputy was on the bridge flagging me down. But, well, I saw the river. It was about 2 feet underneath the bridge. It was clearance. All this muck and stuff was a-coming. And, well, it just blew my mind, because the first one went through, and it wasn't even close like that. This one was. So, like I said, I got up there and looked up the river, and they were flagging me down. I said, no way, I'm going across. Because all the family was on the other side of the river, and I didn't know if, I'd get stuck over here for a week or two. Who wants to be out here? All this mess, So I went across the bridge and parked up on top of the hill and came back down the hill, and then you could hear it. It sounded like a bunch of buffalo. I've never heard any buffaloes in my life, but that's what it sounded like. I heard a buffalo, and they just kept climbing higher and higher on the bridge, and the next thing they were bringing, the trees were coming down, standing straight up in that muck, in that pyrographic stuff. And it just came and started hitting the bridge, and the next thing you knew, the bridge just went. It's like it was made out of cardboard.
While the mud was coming down the Toutle toward the Gazes, 500 million tons of volcanic ash were spreading across eastern Washington. At the eastern foot of the Cascade Mountains, Yakima was the first major city to go black. Then, 250 miles eastward, the afternoon sun disappeared from Spokane. For half an hour, midnight descended. And as the darkness lifted, the ash began sifting down like brown-gray smog turned to flour. The ash from this eruption is really powdery rock and glass. Cars and buses kicked it back into the air, clogging motors, killing visibility, and forcing drivers off the roads. The ash followed Interstate 90 across the plains of central Washington. About an hour southwest of Spokane, a traveler on I-90 approaches the town of Ritzville. Seen from the road, it's the last gas stop for about 50 miles. Seen by the 2,000 people who live there, it's a small farming community. Over 2 inches of ash smothered Ritzville. Kirk Danicus is the mayor.
We had a family dinner planned over at my aunt's house, so we all went over there for the dinner and so forth, and it just kept getting darker, and by 2 o'clock it was completely dark, all the lights were on. About 2:30, somebody hollered out and said it was raining, and we looked out, and several of us went outside, and that's when we discovered that the ash was falling, and of course, you couldn't believe it. You didn't know what it was. It was like a dust storm, but yet it was falling like snow. It was kind of like, I don't even call it like flour, and you'd walk in it, it sounded real hollow as you stepped on it. A lot of people said it was like, they'd think it was like walking on the moon, that kind of a feeling, that it just kind of plopped and hollow underneath you, and it flew up.
Meanwhile, the population of Ritzville doubled. 2,000 motorists staggered in through the dust, their cars strewn along Interstate 90.
Started out that we put them in the churches and in the schools, and the food was taken from the grocery stores here up to the schools by rescue teams, which were set up through the sheriff's office, and then our local fire department, which is all volunteer help, started dispatching this food, medicine, toothpaste, toothbrushes, anything that people needed in these facilities, we took it up to them. On that Monday morning, I was on foot, and I was walking downtown Ritzville, and I went into the local pool hall, and it was just wall-to-wall people. Of course, we had 2,200 people, and I wouldn't say 2,200 were in there, but I would say there was a good probably 250 people in there. Most of those people stayed there through the day. Then when they left and went back to the churches or to the schools that they were in, they started causing problems about where I'm sleeping or who's eating my food, and then there was a couple of cameras that were stolen and problems. So I literally had to shut down for 3 days, shut down all the pool halls and taverns, no more liquor sales in town. And I became unpopular not with the people that were here stranded, but with the local citizens that didn't have a chance to get stocked up.
But over on the Toutle River, the eruption was more destructive. The 40-foot wall of hot mud had thrown the Gazes' house 150 feet back from the riverbank, burying the ground floor.
I'd be walking up and down this bulkhead here, which would be that underneath all this mud, and I'd say, hey, is there a beer up there? And I'd be reaching this high to get a beer off the deck, and that's where it would be. The top of the deck is right there. So that would be roughly 7 feet, I'd figure, you know, that we're standing on this mud right now, mud flow. We got it all lined out where everything should be if it was still there. And my oldest boy, Paul, and my cousin, they started digging down here, and they went right straight down, and if they didn't come right up on the bar. And there it was, they found 2 bottles of champagne, Piper Heidsieck. Very expensive stuff I was saving for I don't know what. Well, it was a cabin to start with. And we bought it, I don't know, what was it, 20 years ago, something like that. And it was just a cabin, and we were spending most of the time out here. So when I'd come home, I'd see, you know, I'd see in my mind's eye what it would be like, and this was we drew up the plans and all these little things that we figured out all our lives, you know, and that's what we did. We built our dream. And it was a big place. There was 5 bedrooms upstairs, and I had a beautiful downstairs, and a fireplace went out through the middle and upstairs, and, you know, pretty hard to talk about, to tell you the truth. We used to shoot the gorge with my mother. She's dead now, but I can remember as maybe 5 years old coming through that, you know, shooting the river with my mother and all my family. It's just something you can't explain. It's just peaceful. You know, the birds, and you can hear everything. It's just so, and at nighttime it's pitch black, you know, out here. And it's just peaceful and serene, and you know, something that's hard to. It's just in your blood. It's not the buildings, you know. That's just nails and wood. It's this that's gone, you know. I don't know. It's just in your blood. It's just you.
Buck and Jeannie owned their property outright. It was worth about $180,000. But their insurance company won't pay for the loss, noting that their homeowner's policy doesn't cover flood damage. About 140 other Toutle River house owners are facing similar problems. The Gazes are getting $35,000 in federal flood insurance and a low-interest loan to buy a new house. For 2 days after the May 18th eruption, Mount St. Helens was quiet. But eastern Washington ground to a halt. Roads and businesses were closed, while people watched TV or walked to the grocery store. Then they began to scrape, shovel, and wash away the ash. In Ritzville, Mildred Wilsant helped clean the 7 blocks around her house.
One of the really good things about this Ashfall, I think, was the fact that we got to know our neighbors better. Because I had some new neighbors who had moved in, and we were all out working in this and sweeping the streets and pushing the ash out and using shovels and wheelbarrows, and it was a friendly way of working. And yet I think if we were out there alone working like that, we sort of could feel sorry for ourselves. But where we're all working together and you're all in it together, it was a kind of community project, and I think we all sort of enjoyed it. And in the afternoon, when on a warm day, we'd usually take out some lemonade or cold drinks, and this way you could have a little fellowship along with it, and I think it was really a wonderful
2 months later, loggers began clearing the Mount St. Helens blast area itself. The downed timber is good for 5 years, but the loggers were trying to stop a flood. As the mountain's muddy sides and flood path dried out, they turned hard, which means that Washington's winter rains may pour off the mountain and flood the Toutle and Cowlitz rivers. So the Army Corps of Engineers is building a giant sieve across the Toutle River Valley, a sieve of earth to trap the rocks and stumps which a flood would shoot down the river toward the city of Castle Rock. The Weyerhaeuser Company is salvaging the downed trees from the area behind the sieve. In 3 weeks, Steve Moore has moved 15 million board feet of timber from the blast area to the mills.
I know the country and I know the roads, and I've lived around here all my life. I've been to Spirit Lake lots of times, picked huckleberries on the side of Mount St. Helens, caught fish out of the Toutle River and killed elk up there and deer. And you just come to a point in your life where you're either going to have to make up your mind. If you're afraid of the volcano and you're afraid what it's going to do to you or your family, your home, or the river flooding or blowing up again or whatever, if it scares you that bad, you've only got one choice, and that's to pack up your bags, sell your house, and move somewhere else in the country. And that's what a lot of people have done around this country. But there's a lot of people that said, well, the mountain was here before I moved here, and hell, this might go on for 25 years, you know, erupting every 2 or 3 weeks or having flash floods or whatever. But you just got to tell yourself that you're going to make the best of it and don't let it bother you and go about your business. And I think these are the kind of people that I really appreciate, because when you look around and see what happened the 18th of May and all the devastation and destruction, and you see what's been done between then and now, as far as cleaning up logging camps, rebuilding bridges, putting in roads, getting people back to work, it's just unbelievable. It's just kind of like a pioneer spirit.
Downriver, the Corps of Engineers is dredging. The mud flow made the Toutle and Cowlitz riverbeds a fraction of their former size, and so likely to flood. To enlarge the riverbeds, the Corps is dragging 25 million cubic yards of mud out onto the banks. It's a big job. This bucket holds only 6 cubic yards. But even when the dredging is done, the riverbeds will still be smaller than they used to be, and the county is preparing for floods. Tom Clapper is directing the work.
It could be started several ways. It could be started just from normal rain or excessive rain or continuing rain. It could even start from the possibility that an eruption at a critical time in which the snow had been accumulated on the side of the mountain or up in that area. You would probably see water up to the very edge or very close to the freeboard edge of this revetment or dike that we're standing on now, and it would stretch out toward the flats and out into those buildings.
The May 18th eruption threw a shoal across the Columbia River, which closed the port of Portland to large cargo ships like this one. That threatened a wide spectrum of people, from northwestern farmers to Portland workers. One of every 8 jobs around Portland depends on the port. So the Corps of Engineers began dredging the Columbia, while ship pilots like Captain Manuel Correa kept smaller ships moving. By August, the port of Portland was ready for normal business. While the Corps of Engineers was busy cleaning the Columbia and Cowlitz rivers, Mount St. Helens wasn't asleep. She's erupted often, on May 25th, or June 12th, or July 22nd, for example. The winds were tricky, and once brought 1/16 of an inch of ash to Portland. It's about 50 miles southwest of the mountain, and the nearest big city. But the ash didn't hurt. Portland's most ash-sensitive industry is Tektronix Incorporated. They build integrated circuits, electronic parts that have to be manufactured in an absolutely dust-free room. The ashfall stopped these people for only 6 hours, and the company is expanding its plant despite the volcano. On the other hand, the eruptions did stop another electronics firm from building in Portland. To city residents, meanwhile, Mount St. Helens isn't as much a threat as it is a backdrop behind the freeways. In fact, Mount St. Helens is luring about 6,000 tourists a day to the 2 volcano information centers on Interstate 5. Milt and Merle Polis are on their way back to California.
Since it's been dormant for 123 years, it's exciting to see something that hasn't been active for a long time. First of all, it's not every day you get to see an active volcano. And second of all, it's just plain exciting to see smoke coming from a mountain. I mean, that's strange.
So the volcano isn't just a cataclysm, it's a tourist attraction. But if a volcano seems to be an unlikely vacation spot, try thinking of it as a source of income. It's been enriching t-shirt salesmen ever since its first eruption.
You mean the amount of money we make daily? Oh, it varies. Around 1,000 mostly.
You can see Mount St. Helens from Portland or western Washington, but its eruptions hit eastern Washington. The orchards and wheat fields have gotten most of the ash. In May, it ruined 50% of the alfalfa hay crop, and now it's dulling the cutting blades of the combines. But it hasn't hurt Dale Galbraith's wheat much. In fact, his problem is finding buyers for the bumper crop. The ash isn't an economic calamity. It's a personal nuisance.
No, it's sort of depressing. Come in every night, and no matter how much you try to clean up the yards, we got a lot to do yet, but just like the corrals where the cattle are, you'll never be back like that, like it used to be, unless you just go in and just literally pick it up in a bucket and haul it away. They just can't believe it. We have an aunt that lives in Seattle, and she just couldn't believe it. We were crying, you know, how bad it was, and you just couldn't believe it. And finally she came over, and then I think as soon as she got here, she could just see like vacant lots in Ritzville in the town, and she got here before they had a lot of the lawns that were cleaned up and, you know, weren't raked yet, and that was enough right there. I suppose even driving along the freeway, you know, further this way we got, the whiter the ground got. And, well, we just hope and pray that the wind's blowing the other direction when it decides to go off. Because we heard it when we were harvesting at another place here, and when it erupted last time, and they said it had blown off, and Ritzville could be its boundary on this side. And we could see the funnel of a cloud and what have you, but it was toward evening, so all we did was eat and go to sleep and get up in the morning and look out. And it didn't look like we got any, so.
When will Mount St. Helens erupt next? And where will the ash go? That's what everyone from Portland to northern Idaho is asking. But the geologists just can't answer. They know the volcano's history, but not its future plans. Mike Folsom is a geologist at Eastern Washington University who's been mapping the depth of ash falls in eastern Washington.
There is what's been called the Pacific Ring of Fire, and the Cascade Mountain Range is a part of that, only a very small part of it. We have every reason to expect that the Cascades are going to continue to be geologically active, volcanically active, for a long time to come. There's a great deal of geothermal heat being made available from Mount Rainier, and there's no reason to assume that Mount Rainier is just going to sit there. It's very likely to become active, and very likely to become active in our lifetime. And if Mount Rainier does become active again, there are a number of rather frightening consequences which could occur from that. One of which is mud flows. About 5,000 years ago, there was a large mud flow which flowed 35 miles away from the vent of Mount Rainier. It flowed down toward Puyallup and Auburn, down toward Tacoma, and it covered the flats of a portion of the Puget Sound in that area with as much as 70 feet of very wet rock, mud, debris. It's kind of surprising that nothing has been active recently in the Cascades, with the exception of Mount Lassen in California. Mount Lassen erupted in 1914, and it was in active but not particularly spectacular eruption for a year, and there were almost 150 separate and distinct events during that year. At the end of this year of activity, the mountain went into several weeks of quiescence, and this was followed by a large summit explosion. The summit explosion is very similar to the May 18th eruption of Mount St. Helens, but it wasn't anywhere near that magnitude.
The Klickitat Indians told pioneers that Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood used to be man and wife, but that they quarreled and threw fire at one another. St. Helens won because she continued to burn. She was still burning in the 1800s. A Scottish doctor, Meredith Gardner, wrote of an eruption in 1831, and Reverend John H. Frost saw one of the biggest 19th century blasts in December 1842.
I observed a column of smoke to ascend from the northwest side of Mount St. Helens. Have learned since that ashes have been thrown out in great abundance, even as far as the Dells.
Paul Kane first sketched this painting in 1847, and Mount St. Helens' last 19th century eruption was in 1857. The geologists say she tends to erupt at least once in a century, but when Northwesterners ask them how long it will last, all they can say is she erupted on and off for about 26 years in her last active period. In the long run, people like Mildred Wellsant, people who have to clean their houses, may be the people most affected by the continuing eruptions. Once it's fallen, the ash is constantly thrown back into the air, and every day a new coating of it lands on yards, tables, chairs, and curtains. It's a housekeeper's nightmare.
Living in Adams County all my life, and dust doesn't frustrate me to have to clean and dust, and it doesn't frustrate me if someone comes in my house and sees some dust, because I know we're going to be with it and we're living with it and we're going to have to put up with it. I find that in the evening as I go to bed, since I have all my bedrooms upstairs, that I have a habit of putting on my dusting mitt and taking it along with me as I go up the stairs and dust the banister and dust the steps and down these posts, because it's very difficult to use a vacuum on this.
Mount St. Helens has done less physical damage than a volcano near cities might have done. The May 18th blast was St. Helens' biggest eruption in about 35,000 years. It killed 62 people, flooded 140 homes, and flattened a hay crop and a valley full of trees. 2 rivers have to be redug. But the eruptions on May 25th, June 12th, July 22nd, and August 7th just shot ash and steam into the air. Mount St. Helens is still dangerous, but Northwesterners are learning to think of their new volcano as a tourist attraction, as a pest, or, like rain and snow, as part of their daily weather.
But I first got used to real dust when I taught school in a little one-room school between Ritzville and Washtenaw. And I had to do my own janitor work, and we had many, many dust storms in the 30s. This was in the 30s. And so it was clean and dust every day, and if you wanted to keep the room clean. But we would have dust storms so terrific that many times we were forced to keep the children in school after school until the dust storm would settle, so that we were sure that they could find their way home. The only way we ever felt about them being active mountains is when we would study in school about volcanoes in other places. And of course we would say, well, I wonder what would ever happen if we'd ever have one here. But we didn't. I don't think we were ever aware that maybe it could happen to us here until we had it. And I think it's been a very good experience. I think it's been very exciting, and I really think that it's been very good for us. And I'm happy that I live where I have seen this explosion.
This program was made possible in part by grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of Seven, Spokane, Washington.